And so I have all sorts of stories to tell you, and I hope by the time I am finished, you will go home and start thinking of your own stories. Simple stories that you can make funny or funnier, or things about, for example, when you met your in-laws for the first time, or when you started medical school, or any of those things, when you met your future wife, or when you first went to college. Because I have told some of my stories to the guys and they have laughed, so I said, okay, I'll tell the rest of the stories. Simple stories, things that are so goofy that you can't believe. Anyway, one of the first stories that happened was one with my wife and I way back when we had gone out for dinner, came back, and I got sick. And I was in the washroom throwing up, heaving, puking, whatever you want to call it. My wife came in and said, what are you doing? I said, what am I doing? I'm vomiting. She said, you know, the trouble with you is, I said, what's the trouble with me? You don't know how to vomit. I said, wait a minute, is there a way to vomit? No, but you're not doing it the right way. Unfortunately, Wikipedia had not been invented yet. But I looked it up years later to see if there was anything on how to vomit properly. They haven't done it, but if you do anything on Wikipedia, it always says, if you know the answers or what have you, please send it to us. So, anyway, that's how the story starts. Anyway, I grew up on 3 months ago, Sid Kavanaugh was here talking about playing baseball. Well, those of you from the west side, I played baseball on the west side of Chicago, 16-inch. I wasn't a good player. I played short center, so you know what kind of player I was. But anyway, I have to tell you, my parents were very, very substantial in my getting to be a better player. Because every night, my father would make sure I was a very fast runner, so he would chase me around the dining room table. Of course, he had a rubber strap in his hand, but that's another story. And I never had time to eat. I never had time to eat because I was playing baseball. So my mother, we lived on the 3rd floor at Help. She would make a sandwich, it was a salami sandwich, and a drink. Well, they didn't have canned drinks, and they had bottled drinks. And she would go up there and wave that bag like that and drop it. And I made sure I caught it because otherwise there'd be a problem. Anyway, when I was young, I had a hobby that you probably never heard of. I collected free samples. Penny postcards were only a penny, and postage was 3 cents. And I would send away to drugstores, to all sorts of places, saying, I'm a pharmacist, I'm this or that, and I would get free samples. And I did have the government after me looking for me once, but that's another thing. But one of the best gifts I received was a sample of a Talon zipper. A Talon zipper, which was about a foot tall and about 6 inches wide, and it had a zipper and a cloth. Now you may say, what's so good about a Talon zipper? Well, look, most of you were born after the 30s, and so you don't realize that if you're born in the 20s, there were buttons on the front of your pants. And if you had to go to the bathroom in a hurry, it was a little difficult. You had to sometimes turn off some buttons in order to get to what you were doing. So I collected free samples, and then one of the things I read about not too long ago is something that we all appreciate. Every one of those, if you're a man, appreciates. That was discovery of bras. Number one, way back in the 1920s, there was a woman by the name of Ida Rosenthal. She had a dress shop in New York, and she was a partner with another woman, and business was lousy. But they had a little basket of stuff, and people would pick up that thing and take it home. That thing was a bra. Bras were not invented yet. This is in the 20s. If anyone remembers the 20s, that was the year of the flappers. The flappers, the thinner the broad the woman was, the better they were done. And so this was the start of maiden-form bras. So this is what, and you know what maiden-form is? It's still one of the biggest companies doing business. Then, because of that, a while back ago, I was reading stories in one of my comedy books about bras for cows. Has anyone ever heard of bras for cows? Is there anybody here that's been a farmer? Does anybody know here how many udders a cow has?
One. 4.
How many?
8.
1.
There aren't too many farmers. The answer is 1. Does anybody know how many teats a cow has?
Enough.
Yes, 4. That's the right answer, boy. I can see no one's been working on the farm. And why do they have bras? Anybody want to have a guess why they would wear a bra?
So they'll drag on the ground.
No, because old cows, if they lay on their teats, reduce the amount of milk they produce. So farmers, this is a place in Wisconsin. I called the guy up and told him I'm going to write a story about him. He said, send him the story. So I did send him the story because when you put bras on cows, and the bras cost about $40, and it takes a little while to do that. So that's just one of the things that in the stories that I write. Now, I went to Crane Tech High School. I don't think anybody in Mello's went to Crane beside me. And why did I go there? Because my cousin went there and he said it's a good school. And the first class was woodshop. It's woodshop 101. And I don't know if any of you are woodshop mechanics, but you take a piece, it was a piece of rough board about, a yard wide and about 6 inches thick, and they give you a plane and they say, okay, level it. Well, week by week, I leveled it, looked to see if it was level, still wasn't. Well, I can tell you, at the end of 13 weeks, it was so thin I could fold it up and make a handkerchief out of it. So. Because it works fine, because I went into the airport and I had the flight training, and I had poor flight, it said poor flight material, but I went down to San Antonio for classification, and the guy said, hold up 2 sticks. He said, with that perception like that, you're not going to become a pilot, and the captain will figure out what to do for you. So he said, okay. The captain said, what do you know about radio? Now remember, this is 1943. I said, I listened to Jack Armstrong and all those other programs. He said, what do you know about guns? The only thing I know about guns is that I had a water pistol. He said, what do you know about woodshop? And I told him my story. So he made me a mechanic. But I was happy because, truthfully, I spent 2.5 years in the United States, and I went all over, and I ended up once in Boca Raton. And for those of you who have a place in Boca Raton, when I was there at 45, all it had was the Air Corps thing and the country club. And he did have a hurricane, and all of us went to the country club. And what I did one time, when I had never driven before I was 18 years old, and I drove the Jeep and it said, follow me. I went out to the field and brought the planes. And one time a plane came back and was smoking, and I thought maybe the Germans had shut us down. It wasn't what happened. I had overthrown too much oil in the plane and it came back down. So. But then they saw my true ability, which was typing, and they sent me to Shinfield. I typed discharge papers. And anyway, one of the things to say, well, tell me about how you got married, because I told you guys to do it. In 43, I gotta get some water. In 43, excuse me, get some water. I went with a friend. He said he's going to Mount Sinai Hospital to see his father, who's in the hospital. Would I like to come along? I said, I don't know. Remember, guys, in 43, if you could recall, who knew about sex? Doctors, and who else? Nurses. He said, well, we'll meet nurses. And actually, that's how I met my wife, because she was a nurse's training there. And I really did learn about sex 3 years later, after when I got married. And so, one of the things that in my neighborhood, which is, I said, Children 14th, we had some characters. I'm sure when you grew up, you had characters. We had a guy who was named Hick Tanner. And Hick Tanner used to drink soda out of a bottle. And when he gave a greps or a burp, you could hear it from miles away. And I wrote a story about the fact that we were down in Boca Raton, and he was in charge one night of taking care of the entire camp. When there was a hurricane warning, and he was all by himself. So what he did is they drank all 3 bottles of the soda and gave a burp that woke up everybody, and they all went over to the country club and blasted. And then I continued writing my story that President Truman called them up to give them congratulations for saving them. And I continued the story by saying, because of that, if you can remember again way back when, on Tuesday at 10:30 for years, the silent alarm, the burglar alarm went off all over America, the air raid warning, and that's all because of that story that I wrote. Anyway, one of the things that going back to what Sid Cavan said about playing baseball here, it was because of playing baseball for the Mel guys that I became a hipster. Now, what's a hipster? A hipster here is anybody who's over 60 years old and has a broken hip. Because when Sid said, hey, you don't have to chase after the ball, 14 years ago when I joined Mel and I played ball, all of us were really running after the ball. Now you don't do it. So I did jump on the ball and I ended up breaking my hip. And of course, in those days, the person to go for a broken hip was Dr. Kaderna, only you could get to see him right away. And so I went to see somebody else, some right bone and joint, and they said, yes, we can do it. I went out to LA, and my son knew someone at Joe's Clinic, which is the famous one in LA, and they do it all. And he said, we can do one here, or you can do it in Chicago where you live, but you have to see Dr. Kaderna. So I came back and made the appointment first to have the surgery. Then I called Dr. Kaderna, got his appointment, which is 3 months later. He said, oh yeah, I can do it. And he said, well, I don't know, it might take a while. I said, no, I've got the date all set. So anyway, I did have it at Glenbrook South. And so when I had that surgery, I was laying on the thing ready for the surgery, and Dr. Kaderna said, Al, it's your left foot. And I said, right. He said, Al, it's your left foot. Right. Al, God damn it, it's going through your left foot. And I said, oh, yes, that's not right, yes, that's right. So anyway, a couple days later, I was laying in the bed, and my wife was alongside, and here comes this pretty nurse and said, Al, it's time to wash up. I'm going to do your washing up. Fine. So she's washing up, and she says to me, Mr. Zimbler, can I wash your privates? I look at my wife and say, oh, go ahead. So after she leaves, I said, hey, that girl's been around a few times. And I said, hey, that's a story. So I made up the story that So I made up the story, went down the next couple days later when I finished, and I went down to the head nurse and I said, tell me this, how do you train people to wash men's privates? She said, we use bananas. I said, isn't that expensive? She said, Trader Joe is 19 cents a banana. I said, look, I have Monday and Wednesdays free, and I would like to volunteer. And she says, I don't know, we've never had anybody like you. I said, we'll take it up with headquarters. I'll be back. So I called the story. I called back a couple of days and Mr. Zimbler, I have to tell you, they won't allow it. And besides, you know that nurse that did yours? She said, yours is the smallest banana she's ever worked with. And this is another, is Jerry Schur here? Is Jerry Schur here? No. Okay, well, my internist is his son, at the Advocate. And I wrote a story and I gave it to Jerry after I wrote the story, and he laughed at it. And because I'm sure you have the same thing. Going to your doctors. So I wrote the story of going to the doctors on my annual physical, and what happens is you get this form that you have to fill out. And I look around and it's like this place, there's no place to sit. So how do I want to sit? I had to fill out the long form. I said, does anybody know how to spell syphilis? A bunch of people got up and left in a hurry. And if you've ever gone to the place that I go, this is a true story as far as the place is concerned. The address is 6131 Advocate. It used to be doctors in the North Shore. And they have a Russian woman who calls everybody in. And so, again, this is part of the story. I look there and calls the doctor. Mr. Cohn! I look around, 3 guys are standing up going in. I said, holy Christ. This is a Jewish practice. No wonder the 3 Coons are going in. Then she says, Harry Cohn. So one guy sits down and the other 2 keep going and says, the one who lives in Skokie Kilmer. So that's the story of the person that goes in. Anyway, my adventures in going into that place with this Russian woman, this is a true story, is that as soon as you go in, she says, quick, get on the scale. And have you ever noticed, I don't know about you, but when I go to a physical, I always weigh myself on my scale, and when I weigh on the doctor's scale, it's always larger than mine. And then she says, sit down, I'll take your blood pressure. I sit down, you have the blood pressure. And then, of course, as a part of the story said, which is true, and we have a few doctors here. Okay, now we want to see how tall you are. So take off your shoes. Okay, go outside, measures you. You know, you've lost an inch since last. You've lost an inch since last year. I said, I know. My wife told me that in bed last night. So I know. So, as I said, these are stories. But then the problem is one of the things they do, and for the doctors here and for all of you, this year's the three magic words is banana, peacock, and plantation. Because if you know, when you go to the doctor, they want to know if you've got your brain all together. They give you three words, leave out, come back later and say, tell me the three words. They have to do that, otherwise they don't get paid. And if you can't answer, they have to write and answer the thing. So I'm sure if you ask your doctor's friend, they'll tell you the same thing. And then, to continue the story, you have to go and get a blood test. And I don't know about you, but I don't like blood tests. So you get the blood test, and when I have these annual physicals, you have to fast, because I try to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning. And the thing is, you have to fast so you can drink. But if you drink, you know, you're saying, God, I got to take the blood test. I hope I can get a sample, and if you don't fast, you can drink the water. So anyway, they give me the thing, and then I go in to do it. And then I'm in there a while, and she knocks on the door and says, and this is an old joke, knocks on the door, you have any problems? I said, yeah, I can't open the top of the bottle. So I gave the doctor the story after I did it. But here's a true story. And I don't know, not because none of you guys have been married, you know, the last month or 2 or 3. But when I got married in 1943, I just came back out of service in 46 is when I got married. You had to take a blood test, and I just got out of the Army, so I knew I was clean and I had been a good boy. And as I said, my wife was at Mount Sinai Hospital, so I could go there and get a free blood test. And I don't know if you guys have done, but this is a true story. I fainted when I had a blood test. And I keep looking at Bill Bluestein, he keeps saying, yes, that's how it is. He's a doctor in case you didn't know. So I fainted, and I don't know if you know what happens when you faint. Your system goes, and when I woke up off the floor, I looked down, my pants were pretty wet from passing urine. So I had to go home on a streetcar, which is way back when, if you know what a streetcar is. Going back and diversing from the story, my daughter-in-law was principal at Anshiam school, and she said, she brought myself and wife down to talk to kids about the good old days. And they said, you know, and I told them the story, oh, we used to ride streetcars. And I said, what's a streetcar? I said, you ever go to San Francisco with a trolley car? Yeah. Oh, that's a streetcar. And some kid said, and what did you get for $1? I said, 100 pennies. My daughter-in-law didn't like that story. But anyway, going back, and I did faint, so what happened is there was a little doctor's white uniform. I said, I'll take that and return it the next day. So I went on the streetcar, which is the 16th Street streetcar on the west side, and a person's looking across from me and saying, I feel a little young to be a doctor. And I said, well, I graduated high school and college at 13. And she moved away. The next one came in and looked at me and said, oh, doctor, I'm so sick. I get problems with my stomach. And I, being a genius, because I used to do it myself, I said, eat 2 boxes of Black Pearl licorice and you'll clean out in a hurry, believe me. And so she left. And the other one came, the third person who looked at me and looked at my hands and said, wait, you don't have a ring, huh? Because I got a girl for you. So anyway, I get home, the phone rings, they said, Al, we have a problem. What's the problem? The person who's handling your sample broke it. And you have to come back tomorrow, which I did, but I brought my bathing trunks to wear, not regular pants. Anyway, I don't know if way back when you were getting older and you traveled, if you had to report to your kids, which is what I did. Every time you traveled, you have to report to your kids. You go to O'Hare Airport and you call up and say, okay, we went through security, we're okay. And you say, okay, did you remember to take your medication? Yes. And how about, did you lock the door? Yes. Did you remember to take mother? Uh-oh, I forgot her at the ladies' room. Oh my God. Anyway, that story. And so I go out to California, and I don't know if you've ever rented from National Car Rental. Anyway, in California, in LA, this is where we landed. I went to California, and I go up to the guy who was going to, give you the car. He's got his head down and reading something, and I say, here I am to get a car, and he says, you have to be over 25 years old. It's me. I got hemorrhoids that are older than 25. and I don't know about you, I drive a plain, simple car, and he says, go upstairs and take the car. And you go upstairs, and I once had a Pacifica. Do you know what a Pacifica car is? Yeah. You need a guy in the back to tell you where the back of the car is. It's that long. I don't like those. And they had all sorts of cars. And finally, they had to go downstairs and get a different car because they had vans and everything. And then my son, so then I called my kid again, say we're here. And he says, don't take the 405. If you've ever been to California and LA, don't take the 405. Because 405 is the only driveway in the whole United States that has a vending machine on the side of the road. You know why? It sells no-dose pills to keep you awake. Because when you travel 405 anyplace, it takes a long time. And I'm sure when you go visit your children, they have the same story that my children have. Dad, there's a great new restaurant. It's wonderful. Oh, but you have to make reservations. Oh, it's too bad. I said, don't worry, I've already done that. So now we go to the restaurant, we have dinner, and if you have young kids who are like 12 and 13, they don't order cheap stuff anymore. You're paying for it. What they do it. And my son, then we go to my son's house to live. This is a true story. And he has a very nice house in LA in Westwood. And we're in the downstairs basement, and he's upstairs. And the next morning he comes to me and says, Dad, you're visiting here. What the hell are you doing last night? All night long, the bed springs were making noise. I said, son, when you drank as much water as I did last night, you made frequent tours to the washroom. So that's my story there. But when I went out to LA, and this goes back 14 plus years, I started looking for classes to take. I took improv classes, I took stand-up comedy classes. The stand-up comedy class is good. It's done by a guy by the name of Greg Dean. You can watch him on YouTube, you can watch him on television. And there was about 8 of us in there. And it's on 3rd in Wilshire. And one of the guys I remember, he was like a bum. He was really like a bum. Come in, drag it, and so forth. And said, asked him, how the hell can you pay for it? It was $200 for the class. Huh?
So you remember?
Do I pass the medical test? I had to, talking about remember everything else. That's another story. And anyway, one story is this guy's a bum. And I said, how come can you afford to do this? It's only a simple story. He begs for money outside. He's got this big sign said, I need money to take improv classes next door. And he was collecting money every night, and it's hard to believe. But that's where I learned how to do improv also. I took improv classes. I don't know if you know who Judy Carter is. She wrote the book on comedy. It's called The Act of Comedy. We have enough talents already. The Act of Comedy, and she used to do stand-up comedy, and then she got smarter. She's doing the same. She decided she's going to go to companies and do company acts. And where before she was running from place to place making a few $100s, she gets anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 for doing stand-up comedy. But what she does, she goes out to the business and learns all about the business, and comes back and starts telling about business. But I first started doing improv out there, and I saw an ad. I had a rental unit for about a couple of years. So Reynolds said, come to Santa Monica, free improv. So I went down there, sat in the audience, and said, hey, you want to do improv? I said, yeah. So now I got on stage, and I've been doing it for a long, long time, and it's great. One of the things that you learn how to stand up in front of people and talk, which is not easy. One games, if any of you played improv, it's called freeze tag. And the one time when my wife finally consented to play that game, we were both, she was on stage with someone, and it's an act. She had her hands up in the air, and he had a gun as if he was holding her up, and I was in the audience, and I tapped on the guy who had the gun, and I said, and what you do is you assume the same position, and you look and say, and you start to sing. So I took a look and said, oh, Jerry, you forgot to shave under your arms today. Anyway, I drew a laugh then. But I've been doing improv for a long, long time, and I have to take a look and see what else. I wrote, I got about 10 pages, so. Oh, in that Greg Dean comedy class, one of the things is writing the second line. They give you a first line, you write the second line. One of the first lines is that the crook ran away for 5 miles. So I wrote the second line. Too bad the cops can learn how to run for 6 miles. And one of the other ones that they gave you the first line, you do the second line. The first line was, I take my father out for Father's Day every Father's Day. Then I put his ashes back on the table. I started writing comedy about 30 years ago, and limericks. There's a lot of difference between writing comics, poetry, and limericks. This is the first poet that I write, and I can't remember this one. But this is the story. John went up the fire escape to drink his six-pack and eat his cake. He quickly returned down the ladder, for his stomach was full, and so was his bladder. Here's the second poem I wrote. The man came in the barber shop and sat in the barber chair. The barber said, get out of here, since you have no hair. I know, he said, turning red, and put his cap back on his head. For, sir, do not take me for a knave. I came here for just a shave. Let me go back and take a look. You're not supposed to hustle for your own business here at the thing, so I'm not hustling for my 6 books, because in 2016, I earned 25 cents in royalties, so you can imagine how many people are buying my book. I've self-published 6 books, and they're all on Amazon. And if you look at my website, you can read 6 stories out of each book. And these are the stories that I started writing about 7 years ago. How did you start writing stories 7 years ago? Well, my son has a friend who's a lawyer. My son's a lawyer, retired. And he came to the house. And he was 60 years old. And too bad Sal isn't here, because Sal would probably appreciate the story. My son's friend just got divorced. He got divorced because he was out getting business for the law firm all the time, not spending a lot of time at home, so he got divorced. And he went out into the dating game. And if you want to really have fun, if you look on YouTube, you see dating after 50, dating after 60. And lately I've been looking at Patty Stangers, who's a millionaire matchmaker woman, talking about how to or what to dating. So he's telling about how he got hooked up with the first woman, and he met her, and he called her up, and he's going to pick her up at her condo. And he had a problem right off the bat. There's no parking in front of the place. What do? Do you invite her to come down or not? Anyway, she gets in the car, and as they're driving, she leans over to him and says, I don't have any underpants on. He almost drives into the curb, and she says, no, I'm just kidding. So they have this great dinner. And an expensive dinner, and it's early. He says, why don't we go to a movie? So they go to a movie, and they go in there, and it said, you have a big, so you buy 2 boxes of popcorn, or 1 box of popcorn, 1 drink, or 2 drinks. They have this big dinner. So he buys 1 box of popcorn and a drink. And they're watching the movie, and he gets hungry, and she's holding a box of popcorn, so he puts his hand in the popcorn box, and she slaps him. So what the hell's that for? She says, no one puts their hand in my box unless I tell them. And she told him that night. Anyway, then another story, he told a story of trying to prepare a turkey dinner, preparing the turkey dinner for Bill. And I don't know if you've ever made a turkey dinner, because I looked it up, and he told the story is, he knows, being a man, we all know about women's upper parts, but the fact is, where the hell is the breast on a turkey? And I found out it's on where there's a plug. That's where the breast is. And Then there, when we're talking about this, I had written this story a long time ago, and when Trump came up before the election and after the election about doing business with China, I had written this story a long time ago. This is a mail place, so I can tell this story. I had written the story about 3 Cents More is the name of the song, the story. It's about a manufacturing company in a small town in the South, and they produce condoms for the government, and they were selling them to the government for a nickel. And what happened is they went out of business because the Chinese came out with the condom for 2 cents. And the question I have for you guys is, would you want to use a Chinese condom for 2 cents or an American condom for that costs 5 cents and figure out, hey, which is safer? And they say, where do you get stories? If you read the newspaper, even every day, the Huffington Post and the others have stories about unusual stories of the day. These are true stories. They had a big strike in San Francisco lately at City Hall. People were protesting, and they were all nude. And the cops had one hell of a time, not getting rid of the nudists, but getting rid of the thousands of automobiles who came to see the nudists. That was a big problem. So that was that. And then, I don't know if you ever watch stupid television, there's something dating nude. Bruce knows it. Do you know, see that one?
Sure.
Thank you, Bruce. They put like 6 people out on an island. And the big question, I didn't write the story, but I'm thinking, how do you review people to be on a television program called Dating Nude? Do they come in dating nude? And I think if you're the one who's interviewed, are you also nude, or you don't stay nude and you interview hundreds and hundreds and say, that had to be a hell of a job, okay? Then I wrote another story about a rental unit, which said clothing optional. And the problem with this is they had the nudist thing on top of the building, and the FAA was complaining because it was on the flight pattern, and the airplane pilots were having trouble looking for the airport, looking down at the other thing. And I told this story about the fact that one of the hardest jobs, there was a mailman there. He was 75, he's still delivering mail when they're supposed to retire at 65, because would you quit if you had a job where you could ring someone and say, would you please come down and sign this thing, we've got a letter, and dating that to a new place. And then I wrote the story with that same thing, with the idea of a kid delivering newspapers to, nude people and not nude people. And the parent said, you can't do that anymore, you're too young. We'll have to bring an agreement. So the mother and father go in there and come out and say, okay, kid, tell you what you do. You can deliver from Monday to Friday, but your father will deliver on the weekend. So. Oh, good. I talked enough. No, I haven't too worse. Anyway, when you talk about memory, and this is a true story. About 15 years ago, my kid said, Dad, you're yelling too much at the grandkids. You got to go see someone. So I went down and saw a senior doctor at Rush, and he sent me to a psychologist up at Weiss Hospital. And I spent 3 hours taking all sorts of tests, and I did very well, except when the one part of the test is trying to build a building and going back to the mechanical drawing, they forget that. And so this past May, and this is another true story, I went to the doctor and he said, you can't drive anymore. Why not? Your kid said you should drive anymore. Why not? They don't want you to drive. And unless you take another psych test and a driver's test also. So I did take the psych test. And it was psychologist. The Medicare will pay for the psych test. They won't pay for the driving test. It's not a regular driving test. It's a regular, the guy comes with his own automobile, and I try to be a smart ass, and I said, okay, you get in the car. Why? I want to see if the lights work, and the left light work, and the right light work. I said, well, before we do it, we test it. I had to pay $175 for the driver's test. He comes from someplace near Southern Illinois, and I had to pay for the mileage. And all we did, he said, okay, park to the left, park to the right. But the biggest part, I got a great report, no restrictions. The greatest part of taking the driver's test is learning how to merge into traffic. If you to do that, you know, you pass the test. But going back to the other test, and if you've ever played, I think they call it the Wisconsin test. You have to move patterns and things all around. And I became average. 15 years ago, I was great, so I passed everything, so now I can write. And I think I will take questions now, so my mouth is dead and dry. And hopefully, as I said at the beginning, storytelling is joke telling, and you're going to go back. One of the things that is really funny, being in the Meltones and going around with one of our great singers, Bill Bluesnings, because every place he goes, doc people, his old patients see him, they still want free advice when they see him. Is that right, Bill? Yes. All right, that's enough. I'll take questions because, as you know, Harvard is storytelling. This is my third speaking event in 14 years. The first time I spoke about improv, the second time I spoke about Jews of Elton, where I lived for 47 years. You say, they got Jews in Elton? No, we're going to have